We're going to talk about that this morning. I told some people this morning, I may be as excited right now, almost 6 years in, as I was when we were about to plant 6 years ago. That's just really what I feel like God has been speaking into my life, and as your pastor, as your friend. And this morning, to do all this stuff and to keep going, we're going to have to grow. You're going to have to grow as an individual. We're going to have to grow some areas in our church. We're going to have to grow as a church for the purpose of growing the kingdom of God. Now, we'll always stay committed to the main thing. The main thing is the main thing, and that's Jesus Christ. We will never waver from that. We will never change our heart in that. What He says, that's what we're going to do. But this morning I want to challenge you. I'm going to be very, very challenging today. I'll just be really, really honest. And for some of you, challenges sometimes make us uncomfortable. And I'll be honest, this morning, I hope you're uncomfortable. I hope at some particular point in time in this message that you just get a little bit squirmish in your seat. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a challenging way. But see, growth is a part of life, or at least it's supposed to be. We're not meant to stay the same. Not as a person, and definitely not as a Christian. There are areas in which we all have grown and we all learn. And, we learn things throughout life as we go through life. Some things are very, simplistic and real. You don't lick a steak knife. Seriously. You don't go to bed at night and take a sleeping pill and a laxative at the same time. It's just part of growing up and learning a few things. I mean, really, right? That thing, where someone comes up and pokes you in the chest, or they come up and they kind of look and point, and you're like, oh, that kind of thing, that's annoying. My dad may still get me with that almost every single time. It's possible. But he does that to me all the time. Let me tell you something else. You can't tell a kid that liver is round steak to make them like it. It's just something that you learn from growing, and my mother may or may not have tried that. However, you can tell an adult that deer meat is round steak, and they'll eat it and love it. Lacey might know something about that. My grandparents are here this morning, and I'll never forget, several years ago, they invited us out for supper, and this was pre-Lacey liking deer meat. Now she loves it. She just grew to love it. But that night, my grandma and grandpa, they fixed us, it was deer meat. But my grandpa came up to me earlier before we ate supper. Now, this is my grandpa, He said, son, don't tell Lacey, but this is deer meat. We're going to tell her it's round steak. And Lacey ate it. And we kept eating it. She was like, man, that was good. I'm just smiling. Everybody's smiling. She's getting more. Pretty soon it's all over. And that night, I don't know that she's ever been that mad at me before. Because I had to tell her. She was like, are you serious? You let me eat deer meat? I said, you loved it. That doesn't matter. But now, of course, she does like it. We all learn and we all grow. We have to if we're going to survive. And I'll even go a little bit farther. To me, if you're going to thrive in life, not just survive, you got to be willing to grow. And this morning, we're going to talk about, just growth in particular. Some growth we can't control. The day that we are born, we begin to grow. I mean, it's just a part of life. We begin to grow. Now, the older we get, as we begin to do some things, we can kind of have a hand in that somewhat. Okay? But, it's just that the physical, most of the physical side of that, it just happens. But spiritual growth has to be intentional. It has to be intentional. You have to want to grow. And even more, it's not just enough to say, well, I want to grow. I can sit here and say, I want to grow all day long. And if I don't do something about it, I don't grow. If you remember the equation from a few weeks ago, information plus application equals transformation or growth. Knowledge isn't enough. We have to put that into action with a designated purpose. Hebrews 6:1, chapter 6, verse 1 says this. So let us stop going over the basics of Christianity again and again. Let us go on instead and become mature in our understanding, or let's grow up. Surely we don't need to start all over again with the importance of turning away from evil deeds and placing our faith in God. It's God's desire that we don't remain spiritual infants for our whole life. Now, there is a time that's just a part of Christianity, but it's not by God's design for us to stay that way. There's also a few false assumptions about growth. I want to share just a couple with you this morning. These are things that people think this is how you grow, or a false assumption about growth just in particular. Number one, that growth is automatic. It just happens. Just happens. Anyone remember the old Archie comics? Anybody old enough to remember that? You know, the actual guy, he passed away this past week. And, you know, and Archie was just a part of the Sunday morning newspaper. I know even as a kid, I remember that. I remember looking at the Archie comics. Well, there was one that showed Big Moose in Mrs. Grundy's classroom. He was taking a test. He went to sleep on the desk. And Mrs. Grundy kind of got aggravated at him and went over and shook him and woke him up and said, "What are you doing?" And his response was, "Well, you told me that if I had trouble on a question, that I should just sleep on it." I don't think that's exactly what she meant. Because sometimes we think it's just, sometimes seriously, we just think that growth is automatic. It's just going to happen. We don't have to do anything about it. Just going to happen, automatically. We just sit back and wait and expect it to happen. But listen, it takes planning and commitment and work. Another false assumption is that growth simply comes with experience. I would say that some people's experience stops their growth. Something tough happens in life and it just shuts them down. And they're done. So to really say that, by experience, now, does it happen? Sure it does. Do we grow from our experiences? If we allow ourselves to. But you can't make the assumption just because of life experiences that we're going to grow. Another assumption is growth is the result of age. Hey, I know some grade schoolers that are a whole lot more grown up than some 50 and 60-year-old people that I know. And I don't say that disrespectfully. I'm just being real. So you just can't say, well, the older I get, the more I'm going to grow. We may grow physically, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to grow in the right ways. The last one I'll share with you really quickly is growth comes from information only. That growth comes from the more I know, the more I study, the more I learn. I can take this keyboard and I can study the components, everything inside of it. I mean, I can know how it works. I can know how it's put together. I can know what it's supposed to do. But if I never take that knowledge and apply it to learning how to play it, I promise you, no one will sit down and just start ripping this thing like Christina does or like my mama does. It takes effort. It takes time. It takes investment. And knowing about it isn't enough. We say the same thing about the Bible. There's a whole lot of people that have a lot of knowledge about God's Word, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But information without application, it's just knowledge. We're directed by God to grow, not to remain infants, but to grow in our spiritual walk, to grow in our spiritual lives. And just knowledge doesn't make us mature, it just makes us informed. So this morning, really quickly, if you'll give me just a few moments, I want to talk about some facts about growth, just really quickly, just to challenge you. The first thing is it takes time. It takes time. It's not something that just happens overnight. Go back to the piano. I mean, it's not something, or a guitar. I've heard so many people, man, I want to play guitar. Teach me how. I can't. Go to Lance. But I can promise you, it takes time. Lance didn't jump up here and start playing that guitar one day just because he wanted to. He invested in it. In fact, and I know like Lance and another good friend of mine, Corey Rush, when people were out doing stuff that other kids was doing, they had their guitar on. They were playing it. They were learning it. And I can promise you, and Lance would probably echo this, that it didn't always sound like it does now. There were probably times when his mom and dad were just like, shut that thing off. But you keep on. You keep on. Growing in that. It takes time. No children are born full grown. They have to learn how to walk. They have to learn how to talk, to take care of themselves, to recognize shapes and colors and forms, and to be polite and to acquire social skills. They have to learn to study, and then they might learn how to drive a car and to play sports or a musical instrument, to survive, to find the job, to keep a job, to do a job. They learn how to build relationships, to raise their own child, to mentor people, to give and to love. And the truth is we never stop growing, or at least we're not supposed to. Even as Christians, there's never a point that we can say that we've arrived. In Hebrews chapter 12, a couple verses there in 10 and 11, it says, "For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best that they knew how. But God's discipline is always right and good for us because it means that we will all share in His holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening is painful, but afterward there will be quite a harvest of right living for those who trained in this way." It takes time. It takes some mistakes. It takes being willing to fall on your face and just totally just blow it. It takes some correction. It takes all those things. An oak tree takes over 100 years to grow. A piece of squash, just a few months. Really, if I'm in this thing for the long haul, wouldn't you want to be something that is strong and stable? And maybe it takes a little bit of time, but it gets to where its full potential is reached. Number 2, growth takes effort. It takes effort. It takes us actually doing something. I want to read a poem to you by A.C. Rose, and it's kind of funny. One night I had a wondrous dream. One set of footprints there was seen, the footprints of my precious Lord, but mine were not along the shore. But then some stranger's prints appeared, and I asked the Lord, "What have we here?" "Those prints are large and round and neat, but Lord, they're too big for my feet." "My child," he said in somber tones, "for miles I carried you alone. I challenged you to walk in faith, but you refused, and you made me wait. You disobeyed, you would not grow. The walk of faith you would not know. So I got tired and I got fed up, and there I dropped you on your butt." Because in life there comes a time when one must fight and one must climb, when one must rise and take a stand or leave their butt prints in the sand. Now, we chuckle at that, and I mean no disrespect by that at all, but it is something to make you think. Because this is what I know. God does His part. When you need carried, God will carry you. But when it's time to stand up and get to work, that's up to you. That's up to me. If He does His part, shouldn't we do ours? Growing takes effort. You want to grow, you have to work at it. It takes effort. Paul said this to Timothy in chapter 4 in 1 Timothy. It says, "Until I get there, focus on reading the scriptures to the church, encouraging the believers, teaching them. Do not neglect the spiritual gift you received through the prophecy spoken to you when the elders of the church laid their hands on you. Give your complete attention to these matters. Throw yourself into your tasks so that everyone will see your progress. Keep a close watch on yourself and on your teaching. Stay true to what is right, and God will save you and those who hear you." You got to work at it. Number 3, as I kind of blurped out just a second ago, growth takes change. And who likes it? I mean, think about it. I like to think that I embrace it, but even when it happens, I get a little shaky. Change is just something that's difficult because we get used to things being a certain way. We get used to doing things a certain way, and you know, it just if it just change, it's just different. But growing takes change. It's just not everyone's favorite subject. We'd rather stick in our old ways and our old traditions. You know, if you look at the church and how the church has changed over so many years, man, even just from when I was a kid, you know, going from, you know, pulling out the Heavenly Highway hymnals every Sunday to, you know, looking on a screen with projectors and lights and all these big sound systems and all that. I mean, it's just, you know, sometimes it's different. And you know, it doesn't have to look this way. I'm not saying that we're changing and other people aren't changing. But I can tell you this, if you're not changing, you're not growing, you're staying the same. It requires that. In the Old Testament, Abraham had to face some major changes in his life in order to obey God and really get to where God wanted him to be. And in verse 12 it says, "Then the Lord told Abram, leave your country, your relatives, your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you." And I mean, it was just that abrupt. Get up, leave everything that you know. Leave it. Walk away from it. Go somewhere completely different. Walk away from the people that you're comfortable around. Get up and leave. "And I will cause you to become a father of a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous. I will make you a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram departed. He got up and left. He did what God said. what he instructed him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Did you catch that? 75 years old. You know what that tells? And you know, you look back in the Old Testament and you say, well, that's pretty young in Old Testament days. 75 is still 75 to me. That's what I grasp my mind around. And I hope I have the faith and the trust and the obedience in God. If God lets me live to 75 and God speaks something that bold to me, I hope I say, okay, let's go. You're never too old to change. You're never too young to change. We're never too this or that. If God is desiring it, which he does, then we have to be willing. Number 4, growth takes help. It takes help. Help from God first. From God first. Romans 12:2, don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you. Who? Who? God. Let God transform you. Let him transform you into who he wants you to be. Let him do his part. Sometimes we don't take God's help, because we get it all figured out, and God said, you're missing the point, and we're like, I got this. Listen, let him do it. This is what it all comes down to. Spiritual growth that really matters isn't the growth that we achieve on our own. It's not. It's the growth that comes from God and his work inside of our lives. This means we have to be open to him. We have to trust him, obedient to him, and available to do whatever he says whenever he says it. But we also have to take help from others. Growth takes help from other people. Ephesians 4:16. Under his direction, or the direction of God, the whole body is fitted together perfectly. God knows what he's doing. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts to grow. Now, see, I hope in my part, I don't want to fail in this, because my part's my part. It's no more important than your part in my eyes. It's just I do my part, help you grow. But if you don't do your part, you could be keeping me from growing. It could be keeping me. It could be hindering some things. Or you don't do your part, then the person next to you or whatever. We all have to do our part. It is a part of growing, helping each other. In fact, it says it helps the other parts to grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. We need each other. We need each other. There are people in our community right now that need you. There are people in our community that need to connect with you. People inside of this church right now, whether you say it and whether or not, you need to connect. You need the people that are sitting around you. I heard Lacey mention just a few minutes ago about upward and outward. The relationship that we build upward is the most important one. The Bible says that it is the greatest commandment, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. But that next one coming after it, the outward, is pretty important. It's pretty important. It takes help. We need each other. We need to love each other, care for each other, be accountable to each other, support each other. And the fifth one that I talk about this morning, the last one just really quickly, this may be the toughest one. And its growth requires us to take risks. It requires some risk-taking. There will come a time in your life when your growth depends on your courage to take a risk. It will. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago about, Lacey fixing to go back to school, and I love the quote, and I'll probably misquote this again, but, talking about, we get to those points in life where fear just kind of stalls us out. And we can either conquer that fear and move forward and experience the things that God has for us and grow, or we can just have it stop us in our tracks. Just quit. I'm okay where I'm at. And maybe you are okay where you're at, but where you're at is probably not where God wants you to end up. Think about that. Taking risks it's a big deal. Taking a step of faith, take some chances. Yeah, you might fall on your face. Get up. There's a story in the Bible, and I won't put the scriptures on the screen, but I do want to just kind of share it with you, and most of you probably heard it before, but it's a story that's found in the book of Matthew, and it's in this particular one, in chapter 25, and it's a story of the parable of the talents. And I'll kind of tell it in my own version, I tend to like to do that sometimes. Because see, there's this guy, this boss, and he wanted to go on a trip. He was a very wealthy man. And he was the kind of guy that, it's apparent that he was the kind of guy that was a risk taker because, he took some of his wealth and just out of the blue handed it to 3 people. And to one guy, the first guy, the Bible says he gave 5 talents. And he gave a lot, okay? And the second one he gave 2, and then the third one he gave 1. And I have to believe this, that, because sometimes we read 5, 2, and 1. Well, the 1 didn't get very much. I have to believe it was a lot. I look at the story and you kind of read the history. I have to believe he was a very rich man, and that in this story it was this 1 was still a bunch, probably more than I've ever seen. But regardless of the fact, so the boss goes on a trip, and so here's these 3 guys that this rich dude had given this money to, and the first one that was given the most amount, which you think would be the most to lose, decides, you know what? Man, I can do something. I get crazy with this. I know he's giving me a lot, but I think I can make more. I think I can do more with what he's given me. And so that's what he does. He goes out and he works and he invests in it, and he finds ways to make that multiply, and he turns that 5 into 10. And the second guy, he kind of had the same thought and the same mentality because he'd been given a lot too. But and the thought of it was just like, you know what? Most, and I'm not saying, listen, I'm not going to stand up here and preach on the lottery. If you want to play it, whatever, it's fun. If that's what you think, whatever. But did you know that most of the people that win the lottery are broke with just in a short amount of time? And you know why? It's because of what happens you get a lot. You're not working to grow anything. You're not working to make more. Successful business people, they work hard. It takes effort. It takes time. They invest. Sometimes they mess up. Sometimes they make a mistake, but you can't be afraid of that because the return is everything. And this one guy, he was scared. He was given a lot. It wasn't like, I don't believe he was just given a penny. He was like, oh, look at my penny. I believe it was a lot of money. And he got scared, and he allowed fear to cripple him and keep him from growing and then growing what had been given him. So he goes and he buries it in the dirt. And so the boss comes home one day, and he sees the 3 guys, and the first guy he goes to, and the guy's like, man, I know you gave me a lot, and I know it may sound really crazy, but I just went and invested this and worked really hard, and man, I just doubled it. And the boss was like, man, that is awesome. That is so great. And the second guy did the same thing, and it was just, it was like, this is phenomenal. Man, thank you for taking a risk. Thank you for the challenge. Thank you for all of that. And then he goes to the third guy, and the third guy's like, hey, sir, man, I know you gave me a lot, but I was kind of afraid of losing what you gave me or messing up. So I just went out and I dug it in, and here it is, every penny, every dime, right here, right back to you. The boss looked at him and said, you wicked and lazy person. You wicked and lazy. Man, them are harsh words. That's hard. You've been given a lot. I've been given a lot. Maybe some of you have 5 talents, maybe 2, maybe 1, maybe 10. I don't know. But I don't care the number. It's the value. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords died on a cross to save your soul and give you a hope for it. It doesn't get any more valuable than that. And then the Holy Spirit, kind of reaches into your life when you give your life to Jesus. And there are things, you have been made a certain way for a certain purpose, created to be a masterpiece, to do the wonderful, awesome, amazing things that God planned for you a long time ago. What are you doing with your investment? What am I doing? What are we doing? See, at Cross Point Church, our mission is very clear: to point people to a real relationship with a real God. You know, and almost 6 years in, as I said earlier, I think we've done a really good job of that. Many of you here this morning weren't here when it all started. Reaching people, seeing people saved and lives changed and people baptized. And I mean, some amazing, cool stuff. We're investing in a lot of stuff. And you know, we've given a lot. You've given a lot. We've taken a lot of risks. And we've seen some big returns. But I've always said since day one, before the very first service, and I remember praying this just as clear as I possibly could pray it, God, don't allow me to let this church become just another church. And God, don't allow me to just become another Christian. He's given me a lot. He's given you a lot. He's given this church a lot. I don't ever want to get to the place where I'm afraid of what He's given me, that I just go bury it in the dirt, waiting for Him to come back someday so we can stand and say, I was too scared. That was too hard. I don't want Him looking at me saying, you're lazy, boy. Got to be willing to change and take some risks and keep up the effort. So if we're pointing people to a real relationship with a real God, how do we do that? Then I want you to know something. You're going to hear this a lot. We will be intentional with everything that we do in this church. I feel like we have been to this point. I feel like we're headed more so in a refined way. But my goal is this. In pointing people to a real relationship with a real God, we will do that by helping people develop upward and outward relationships, by helping them connect with God and with people. Now, as Christians, like I said earlier, we get this upward thing going pretty good. We can really work on this thing here, me and God and me, and you know, and I'm reading my Bible, I'm praying, you know, I'm worshiping, I'm doing all this stuff. But for whatever reason, we just stop when it comes to these outward relationships. Man, we come to church faithfully, and that's awesome. I'm not discounting church attendance because it's important. You should be here. But it doesn't stop there. I wish I could paint a picture that was so clear that just jumped out on the page, the importance of connecting with other people. Upward and outward focused. Remember in the All In series, we're supposed to love God all the way and love others upward and outward. It means serving in obedience. It means leaving the butt prints in the sand and getting up and doing something different. Making an intentional effort, acting on the information, applying it, serving in obedience so others can do the same. There's a law that John Maxwell talks about called the law of the lid. He has a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, one of my favorite books. And the law of the lid is such a big deal. And a lot of times, you know, I remember when I first studied this several years ago, I was thinking, well, the leader, but this is everyone. And the law is this, that every single one of us have a lid to our capacity, or a lid to what we do. We control the lid. We control how high it goes and where it stops. And this is what I know, is if I put this lid on, if I put the lid on me, I promise you, as long as you stay here, you'll stop growing. It will happen. You will have to go somewhere else or do something totally different to grow. So shame on me if I've got the lid on. But it works with you too. If you put your lid on, you may keep the person next to you, or the coworker that you have, or you know, the stranger down the street, or the worker in Walmart. I don't care what it is. You put the lid on, you can hinder the people around you from growing. So I challenge, take the lid off. Wouldn't we? I mean, knowing what we know about Jesus and all He's done for us, why would we want to stop growing? I mean, really. Upward and outward. Giving and obedience so others can experience Jesus. Over the next few weeks, I'm just going to be really honest with you. As your pastor, you've heard me say it before, I just get flustered sometimes standing up here talking about giving because it feels like I'm like fundraising, and I'm not fundraising. So instead of me talking about it, you're going to begin to see things that you're given to. You saw the VBS. You're going to see, the opportunity with the school supply giveaway. You're going to start seeing things that are going on in the Philippines and seeing things that are going on in Honduras and in Mexico down in Juarez. Man, what a huge door that's opening up in one of the most dangerous places our world has ever known. You're going to see it. And I want it to grip you. I want it to be a passion that's inside of you. Because you're investing in a mission, the mission of Jesus. I don't care what the area is. We just need to grow. And it all begins upward, but it has to extend outward. No more excuses. No more. And listen, church, I'm not on you. I'm not saying we're failing. I'm challenging us to go forward. We do awesome. You guys invest. We see life change. I can't even begin. It's been an awesome 6 years. It's amazing. Your generosity and your faithfulness is just, in my opinion, unmatched. It is awesome, but it doesn't stop there. And the biggest excuse for so many people is I don't have time. Because we talk about, I'll connect with God, but connecting with other people, man, I don't have time. I'm busy. I know life is busy. I get it. I got 6 kids. I got 4 grandkids. I serve on 3 boards, 4 committees. I work 2 jobs. My wife's about to go get her master's. My daughter's about to graduate. I have ball games all year long for my entire life. I get busy. And I don't say any of that to say, oh, look at me. It has nothing to do with it. Because I'll promise you this, I will always make time to invest in the relationships outside. Connecting with people. Growing the relationship. Listen, you've heard for the last few, I just be honest, at times it's been very frustrating when we've started to work on getting people to jump into our connect groups. And those connect groups are a big deal, and we have them on, Sunday right after church with Brian and Connie and Dennis and Buffy, and Tuesday night with Fallen, Wednesday night with Sisters by Grace, and we have 2 Sunday night groups that meet, in different locations. And you've heard us talk about, man, it's important to get in these, it's important to connect. And listen, I get that we're busy, but you need this. You need to grow. You know why you need to grow? Because somebody else needs to grow. Somebody that need to grow. You step up a level, they step up a level. I just be blunt, you need to connect. And you'll have that opportunity very shortly. In fact, change, taking risks, I'm going to take the excuse of being too busy away. Next week in this church, we will do something that, to my knowledge, the way it's going to be done, I can't find anyone that's done it. I've been looking because I want a model. I want something to help me. And we're just kind of going, huh? And we were talking in a staff meeting the other day. We spent one afternoon just as a staff, just kind of collaborating. And it was just like, well, we'll need to do this and we need to do that. And we'll start it when this kind of works out and this kind of works out. And Adam, and all of his big smile, looks us square in the face and says, if we're supposed to do it, why don't we just do it? We all just kind of looked at each other. And, okay. Now some of you are saying, what are we doing? I ain't telling you. You have to come back next week to find out. But it's that important. It goes along with our mission. And it will help you develop upward and outward relationships. It's that big of a deal. It all boils down to this. Once again, if we believe what we say we believe, then our only response to those beliefs is to grow upward and outwardly in our relationship with God and people. It's got to happen. How we grow, how we serve, how we give, how we treat others, how we love others. If the individual can grow, now catch this. If you as an individual put this into action to grow, this is what I believe. Not only will you grow, but our groups will grow. If our groups grow, our church will grow. If our church grows, the kingdom grows. And that's the most important thing. And then aside from that, actually not aside, on top of that, the opportunities, I give you my word as your pastor, that opportunities are going to come your way to put that into action. Not only just in your connect groups, but Jesus gave us a directive in the first part of Acts to go everywhere. Everywhere. Now, I know he gave us names of towns and cities and countries, but basically, in essence, what he was saying was to go into your community, go into your state, go into your nation, and go into the world. And tell people about me. Upward and outward connections will change your life and the lives of others. No more excuses. Faith, courage, trust, obedience, and action. It's time to allow the upward to affect the outward.